The wedding cost £32 million. The dress was borrowed from the Queen's personal collection. The chapel was 500 years old. The congregation included the biggest names on the planet. And by March 2026, the man who has done more damage to Meghan Markle's public identity than any tabloid, any rival, any disgruntled palace aide has put it all under a microscope and asked a question the world is only now beginning to sit with seriously. What was really happening behind that veil? Tom Bower is 79 years old. He has spent 50 years as Britain's most feared investigative biographer. His subjects have included prime ministers, media moguls, and the world's wealthiest businessmen. None of them have successfully sued him. None of them have made a single provable false statement about his research stand up in court. When Bower publishes a book, what is inside it has been checked, sourced, and checked again. His new book, Betrayal, Power, Deceit, and the Fight for the Future of the Royal Family was serialized in the Times of London beginning March 13, 2026. It hit #1 on Amazon before it was even published, before a single copy had been physically printed and placed on a shelf. #1. And Meghan's team called it deranged conspiracy and melodrama. They issued a formal statement. They accused Bower of fixation. They questioned his methods. They did everything except address the specific details inside the book. And that is what we are going to do today. Because Tom Bower did not write a book of insults. He wrote a book of details. Specific, documented, sourced details about the wedding that Meghan has spent 6 years calling the greatest day of her life while simultaneously describing it to Oprah Winfrey as a spectacle she was forced to endure. Today, we are counting down the 10 dark truths Tom Bower has revealed about Meghan's royal wedding. The ones that explain why her team responded the way they did. The ones that explain why the book went to #1 before publication. And the ones that explain why, in March 2026, Meghan Markle is, by the accounts of every source with access to her inner circle, shaking. We are going to take our time, because every single one of these truths deserves to be explained properly. So, settle in. This is the full story. Dark truth number 10. She knew exactly who Harry was before the first date. Let us start here, because everything else in this story flows from this one foundational question. When Meghan Markle sat across from Prince Harry at a private members club in London in July 2016, was she the American actress who had simply been set up on a blind date by a mutual friend? Or was she a woman who had done her research? Bower's book addresses this through sources in the social circles Meghan had been navigating since she began spending significant time in London in the mid-2000s. The picture his research paints is of a woman who was not passive in how she arrived at that table, who understood Harry's interests, his causes, his emotional landscape, and the particular way that a commitment to humanitarian work and the memory of his mother had shaped him. Bower does not present this as a criminal act. He presents it as calculated strategy. And he supports it with something that Meghan's own Oprah interview made difficult to walk back. She told Oprah, live on American television, watched by 49 million people globally, that she did not Google Harry before their first date. She said she did not know much about the royal family. That claim has always invited skepticism from anyone who applies basic logic to it. Meghan Markle was a 34-year-old professional actress with a smartphone and an internet connection. She was active on social media. She was deeply engaged in causes that intersected directly with Harry's work. She was a regular reader of outlets that covered celebrity news. The idea that she had not at any point looked up a British prince she was about to meet for dinner requires a degree of credulity that Bower's sources are unwilling to extend. This is dark truth number 10 because it is the foundation. If the person Meghan presented at the altar was a carefully constructed version of herself calibrated to appeal to one specific man, then everything that followed from the wedding planning, to the Oprah interview, to the Netflix documentary, exists in a different context than the one we were sold. Dark truth number 9. The car choice was not accidental. On the morning of May 19, 2018, Meghan Markle arrived at St. George's Chapel in Windsor in a Rolls Royce Phantom IV. This specific detail appears in multiple pieces of royal reporting and is not disputed by anyone. The Phantom IV is one of the rarest vehicles in the royal muse. 18 were ever produced between 1950 and 1956. They were built exclusively for royalty and heads of state. And the most famous person associated with this particular model of vehicle was Wallis Simpson. Wallis Simpson was the American divorcee whose relationship with King Edward VIII in 1936 produced one of the most significant constitutional crises in the history of the British monarchy. Edward VIII abdicated the throne. His brother Albert, who never expected to be king, was forced to assume the crown as George VI. The trauma of that abdication shaped the royal family's relationship with outsiders, with divorcees, and with Americans claiming a place within the institution for decades. Bauer's account, drawing on palace sources, claims the royal household had suggested alternative vehicles for practical and symbolic reasons. The Phantom IV was insisted upon. Whether that insistence was deliberate symbolism or simply a preference for the most beautiful car available is something no one can prove definitively. But palace insiders who spoke to Bauer did not interpret it as coincidence. They interpreted it as a signal, a message delivered in the language that the institution would understand clearly. That Meghan was not going to be constrained by the institution's history of what happened when Americans entered the family. That is a loaded message to send. On your wedding day, to the woman whose mother was shaped by that abdication crisis. That woman was Queen Elizabeth II, and she was sitting in the front row. If you are watching this channel for the first time and you want to follow this story as it continues on and Tom Bauer's book has considerably more still to be revealed, please subscribe right now. We cover the royal family in the depth and detail these stories deserve. Hit subscribe, turn on your notifications, and every new video comes straight to you. Dark Truth. Number 8. What happened inside the chapel before the guests arrived? St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle is one of the most significant buildings in the history of Britain. It was built beginning in 1475 under King Edward IV. It houses the remains of 10 British monarchs. It is the home of the most noble Order of the Garter, the oldest and most senior order of chivalry in the world. It is, by any reasonable historical measure, a sacred and irreplaceable piece of national heritage. According to reporting that appeared both ahead of and alongside Bauer's book, reporting from journalists including Robert Jobson, whose access to palace sources is among the most established in royal journalism, Meghan found the chapel's atmosphere not to her liking before the ceremony. The specific complaint referenced in multiple accounts relates to the smell of an ancient building. The reported solution she sought was the deployment of air fresheners, or atomizers, throughout the chapel before guests arrived. Palace staff, who understood both the historical significance of the building and the practical impossibility of spraying chemicals in a consecrated historic monument, did not comply with the request. The reaction from Meghan when her request was declined is described in accounts by those who were present as considerably more intense than the situation might have warranted. Bauer frames this incident not as bridezilla perfectionism, but as something more revealing. He frames it as the moment that illuminated a fundamental incompatibility between Meghan's understanding of what the wedding was and what the institution understood it to be. To the palace, St. George's Chapel was an irreplaceable piece of living history that happened to be the venue for a wedding. To Meghan, by this account, it was a venue that needed to meet her standards. That distinction matters because it explains what came next. Dark Truth. Number 7. The solo walk and what it was designed to communicate. Meghan walked the first portion of the St. George's Chapel aisle alone. This was presented publicly as a powerful symbol of female independence, a modern woman who did not need to be given away, who arrived at her own wedding on her own terms, who chose her path to the altar herself. The symbolic reading was widely praised. Many women watching around the world found it genuinely moving. Bauer's account examines what happened in the moments before and during that walk with considerably more detail than the official narrative provided. His sources describe an atmosphere of significant tension in the preparation period immediately preceding the ceremony. They describe the management of the moment, who was positioned where, what the camera was supposed to see, what it was not, as something that went beyond the usual choreography of a royal wedding. The decision to walk alone had a practical dimension that is less discussed in the sympathetic coverage of the moment. Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, was not there. His absence was partly the result of circumstances, the staged paparazzi photographs, the heart surgery, and partly the result of decisions made about whether to bring him to London at all. Bauer's assessment of Thomas Markle's exclusion is one of the darker elements of his account. He suggests the distance from her father was not purely circumstantial, that the visual of Thomas Markle, a working-class American man with no particular polish or social ease, did not fit the image Meghan had been constructing. That Doria Ragland, her mother, who arrived just 48 hours before the ceremony and who carried herself with a quiet dignity that translated beautifully on camera, was the parent who served the narrative. Thomas Markle was the parent who did not. Prince Charles, then the Prince of Wales, reportedly made personal efforts to encourage reconciliation. Those efforts were not successful. Bauer presents this as a decision, not a circumstance. Dark truth number 6. The private vows claim and the Archbishop's response. During the Oprah Winfrey interview broadcast in March 2021, Meghan made a statement that produced an immediate and significant credibility problem for her. She told Oprah that she and Harry had been married privately 3 days before the public wedding, that the Archbishop of Canterbury had conducted a private ceremony in their back garden, that the real marriage, was not the £32 million ceremony watched by millions. It was a quiet, private, personal exchange. The Archbishop of Canterbury at the time of the wedding was Justin Welby. He is not a man who makes public statements about his pastoral relationships with members of the royal family. His office maintains a strict position of discretion about private conversations with royals. And yet, on this specific claim, he spoke. The Archbishop made clear through his office that the only legal wedding ceremony was the one conducted at St. George's Chapel on May 19, 2018. What had taken place before was not a wedding. It was a private exchange of vows, words spoken between two people, meaningful to them, but carrying no legal weight. No ceremony, no legal marriage, no Archbishop conducting a service in a back garden. When the statement came from the Archbishop's office, the Sussex team had to walk the claim back. They reframed it. They called it a personal moment rather than a legal ceremony. Bauer's analysis of why the original claim was made goes to something he identifies as a recurring pattern in how Meghan manages her public narrative. By claiming that her real marriage was private and personal, and that the public ceremony was something the palace had staged for the world, she was doing two things simultaneously. She was positioning herself as authentic and private in contrast to an institution she was framing as performative. And she was distancing herself from the £32 million that had been spent on her behalf, placing the spectacle in the palace's account rather than her own. Except the Archbishop confirmed the spectacle was the marriage. Read that sentence again. The £32 million event that Meghan described to Oprah as something staged for the world was, legally and ecclesiastically, the only wedding. The private garden exchange she offered as evidence of her authenticity was not a wedding at all. Let us pause here. We are at the midpoint of the story, and the 5 truths ahead contain the material that Bauer's sources say Meghan is most concerned about: the staff treatment, the Tiara confrontation with Queen Elizabeth, the bridal party incident, the Diana framing, and the final reckoning with what the spectacle actually cost. If you are finding this as significant as we do, please share this video with someone who deserves to have this story told in full. It takes just a moment. Thank you. Dark truth. Number 5, the Sandringham weekend and the friends Harry lost before the wedding, before the engagement even. There was a weekend at Sandringham that those who attended describe as the moment they understood something that Harry would not understand for considerably longer. Harry had spent years building the close friendships that sustained him through the worst period of his adult life, the years of grief and searching after Diana's death. His oldest friends were men from his school years, his military years, his charity work. They were loyal, tested, and genuine. They were also, by the accounts of those who attended the Sandringham shooting weekend in the autumn of 2017, deeply unsettled by what they experienced. Bauer's sources describe a gathering in which the social dynamic was not what Harry's friends had expected. They describe conversations that felt less like relaxed friendship and more like interrogation. They describe Meghan engaging with the kind of intensity on topics of gender and social justice that left the group feeling judged rather than welcomed. They describe leaving that weekend with a specific and shared concern about what they were watching happen to their friend. The feedback they gave Harry was honest. They liked Harry. They were worried about Harry. They did not like what they were seeing and how Harry was changing. Bauer documents the consequence of that honesty. Harry's oldest friends were not invited to the wedding dinner, the private, close reception after the public ceremony that is traditionally where a couple celebrates with the people they love most. The people who had been closest to Harry for decades found themselves excluded from the most intimate celebration of his life. That exclusion did not happen by accident, and the people who were excluded understood why it had happened, and they have largely not spoken about it publicly, but they spoke to Bauer. Dark truth number 4. The tiara and the queen. The tiara story is one of the best-known details from the behind-the-scenes account of the wedding, but Bauer's version of it goes further than the detail itself. He uses it to describe a structural confrontation that illuminates something important about what the wedding period actually produced. Meghan had expressed a preference for a specific tiara from the royal collection. The tiara in question had questions attached to its provenance, its history, where it came from, and under what circumstances. That made it unavailable. The Queen's dresser, Angela Kelly, communicated this to Harry and Meghan. Harry's response to the communication was, by the accounts of those present, disproportionate. The phrase, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets, has entered the permanent lexicon of reporting on the Sussex period specifically because it was heard by multiple people in the context of this conversation. But the more significant moment in Bauer's account is what Queen Elizabeth said when the matter was brought to her attention. She was direct. She was firm. She made clear that decisions about the royal collection were not subject to preferences or pressure from anyone, including her grandson's fiancé. And she made it clear calmly, without drama, and with the absolute authority of a woman who had been queen for 65 years. That moment, Bauer argues, was the pivot. It was the moment when the institution made clear to Meghan that the rules she was operating under were not negotiable in the way she had perhaps expected they might be. And it was the moment when, according to his sources, Meghan's relationship with the institution shifted from navigating it to resenting it. The Queen gave Meghan the tiara she was given, Queen Mary's diamond bandeau. It was historic, beautiful, and entirely appropriate for a royal wedding. It was also not the tiara Meghan had asked for. That distinction mattered to the people who witnessed what happened when Meghan received the decision. And it mattered to Bauer, because it was the first clearly documented moment in which the word no arrived in Meghan's royal life with the full authority of the institution behind it. Dark truth number 3. The bridesmaid dresses and what was said. Meghan told Oprah Winfrey that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, made her cry in the days before the wedding over the bridesmaid dresses. The claim landed with enormous impact. It cast Catherine, who was at that point still being referred to as Kate Middleton by most of the global press, as an aggressor in a moment of pre-wedding vulnerability. Bauer's account, drawn from sources who were present during the dress fitting in question, offers a fundamentally different account of what occurred and why. The issue centered on Princess Charlotte's bridesmaid dress and how it fit. The tension was not simply aesthetic. There was a question of royal protocol, the specific requirement for tights at formal events that Catherine raised and that was met according to those present, not with openness, but with resistance. And there was a broader dynamic in the room that multiple sources describe with considerable consistency. Catherine was not the person who was reduced to tears by the end of that encounter. She was the person who left the encounter and cried in private later. Because she had come to the fitting with genuine concern about the protocol and the fit, and had been met with a level of dismissal and condescension that left her shaken. Why does this matter in 2026? Because it matters enormously who made whom cry in that room. Meghan's Oprah claim placed Catherine in the role of the powerful aggressor who reduced a vulnerable outsider to tears. Bauer's account places that story in direct contradiction with the accounts of those who were present. And Catherine could not respond. Cannot respond. The never complain, never explain tradition of the British royal family means that the Princess of Wales has sat in public silence while a version of events she cannot recognize was accepted by a significant portion of the global audience as truth. The people who were in that room spoke to Bauer. Dark truth number 2. The Diana strategy and what it cost. Perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated element of Bauer's analysis of the wedding period concerns the way in which Meghan positioned herself in relation to Princess Diana. Not crudely, not explicitly, but through a series of careful, accumulated choices, that together produced a specific impression. The wedding veil, the charity walks that echoed Diana's most iconic images, the framing of press intrusion and language that could have come directly from Diana's own accounts of her experience with the media, the use of Harry's grief, his deep, unresolved, defining grief about his mother's death, as an emotional foundation for the couple's shared narrative of victimhood. Bauer's argument is not that Meghan set out to impersonate Diana. His argument is more uncomfortable than that. He argues that the Diana framing served Meghan's narrative in ways that were calculated rather than organic. That the equation of their experiences, an American actress facing tabloid coverage and a Princess of Wales pursued to her death in a Paris tunnel, was made deliberately, and that it served a purpose. That purpose was to make Harry's instincts toward protection and rebellion feel righteous rather than destructive, to make the decision to leave the royal family feel like a continuation of something rather than a rupture from it. Princess Diana spent 20 years in the royal family before her public relationship with it became the complicated thing it became. She carried out thousands of engagements. She built relationships with charities across decades. She earned her complexity through sustained and genuine service. The people inside the palace who watched the Diana framing during the wedding period and in the years that followed did not find it respectful. They found it presumptuous, and some of them spoke to Bauer about how it felt to watch. Dark truth number 1, the spectacle she asked for and then disowned. And now we arrive at the truth that sits at the center of everything else, the truth that makes the entire structure of Meghan's post-royal public identity unstable in a way that no amount of brand management can fully address: the £32 million wedding. Meghan Markle sat across from Oprah Winfrey on American television and used the word spectacle to describe the ceremony she had participated in. She described wanting something private and personal, implying that the public event was something imposed upon her rather than something she had shaped. The word spectacle has lived in the coverage of the Sussex story ever since. Because it is the word that made the British public, and many of whom had lined the streets of Windsor on a Saturday morning, bought programs and memorabilia, celebrated what they believed was a genuine moment of national life, feel specifically and personally rejected. Bauer's account of the wedding planning period documents Meghan's involvement in the details of that ceremony with considerable specificity. The dress choices, the music, a gospel choir performing a Ben E. King song in a 500-year-old English chapel, the staging of her solo walk, the selection of the celebrity congregation, the choice of preacher, the choice of car, every element that made the wedding visually and dramatically distinctive from any previous royal wedding in living memory. These were not palace impositions. They were choices, actively made, fought for in some cases, insisted upon. And then, the event those choices produced was described to Oprah as a spectacle for the world rather than something authentic. Bauer's analysis of this contradiction is the centerpiece of his assessment of Meghan's credibility problem. He argues that the wedding was not something Meghan endured. It was something Meghan directed. That the £32 million produced a specific visual product, images that launched her global brand, footage that became the foundation of the Netflix documentary, a platform that she used to build everything that came after. And then, once the platform had served its purpose, it was reframed as something that had been done to her. The public, the millions who celebrated on that day, who watched on television, who considered the wedding a genuine expression of something, were told that the celebration they had shared in was a performance Meghan had been required to give for their benefit rather than her own. That is dark truth number 1. And it is the one that Bauer's book puts most squarely on the record, because the Archbishop confirmed the spectacle was the marriage. The palace records confirm who made the choices. The footage confirms who directed the details. And the public is left with a question that no statement from Meghan's team calling Bauer's work deranged conspiracy can answer. If the wedding was a spectacle she endured, why are the decisions that made it a spectacle her decisions? The book went to number 1 on Amazon before it was printed. The team called it deranged, the Archbishop had already spoken, and the footage has always been available. The truth, as Bauer has spent 50 years demonstrating, has a way of finding its level. And in March 2026, it has found it. Thank you for watching today all the way to the end. This is one of the most significant pieces of investigative royal writing produced in years, and we are grateful to everyone who stayed through all 10 truths. Before you leave, please drop a comment below and tell us which of the 10 truths you found most significant, and whether you think Meghan's team's decision to call the book deranged, conspiracy helped her, or made things considerably worse. We read every comment, and if you are not yet subscribed, please do it now. Click subscribe, turn on your notifications, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you. We will see you soon.